Hi, my name's Heather Neal and I'm the Executive Director of the TrackSAFE Foundation. TrackSAFE is the harm prevention charity established by the Australasian Railway Association and UGL in 2012. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands where we meet. For me, based in Canberra, it's the Ngunnawal people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This is the 7th Rail Are You OK Day, and we're expecting more than 110 organisations and 90,000 employees to be involved in a wide range of activities that build and refresh skills and confidence. So you can ask a colleague you're worried about, are you okay, and know what to do if they say no. Today, Catherine Newton, CEO of Are You OK, will be talking to us about workplace wellbeing. There's more to say after Are You OK? And Justin Geange, Are You OK Community Ambassador, will share his experience about the importance of continuing the Are You OK conversation. We'll have a Q&A after the presentation, so please post your questions at any time in the questions pane on the attendees control panel on the right of your screen. And just a reminder, if any of the discussion today raises issues for you, please reach out to a friend, your family, a work colleague, your medical practitioner, your employment assistance program, or Lifeline on 13 11 14. Now let me introduce Catherine and Justin. Catherine's worked for Are You OK for 5 years, and before that with White Ribbon Day, working to prevent violence to women. As a volunteer, Catherine's worked as a Lifeline telephone counsellor, listening to and providing support for people in crisis. Justin's worked in the rail and construction sectors and applied his lived experience to encourage others to start a conversation about mental health and suicide prevention. So Catherine, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Heather, and welcome everyone for this Rail Are You OK Day webinar. I know the big day is tomorrow, but I think what Heather said there about building on and refreshing the skills to equip ourselves to feel more confident and more comfortable to recognise the signs that someone might be struggling and how to ask that question. But of course, importantly, how to stick around for the answer. There are many of you in the rail industry. You're very diverse. You have so many different jobs. You have so many different environments. And what we try to do at Are You OK is try to frame this conversation for you simply. But we know sometimes there are some complex answers, or there may be some complexities to ask in this question. So I hope today, if you've heard it before, then I hope today reinforces and refreshes for you. And if this is the first time you're hearing it, I hope you can take away some real solid tips around how you can look out for those in your world. We find at Are You OK that a really good way of describing a conversation in action is to hear from one of our wonderful ambassadors. All of our ambassadors are volunteers, and they all share their own stories of a time where they have been in a dark space and someone has asked them if they were okay, how that happened, and what action was then taken, and how they have a more positive way. They've prevented, and they now have that quality of life because they feel that greater sense of connection and of support. It all comes down to some compassion and empathy. So as Heather mentioned, we have Justin Geange here to tell you his story. So let's start by hearing from Justin, and then I'll come back and we can go from there.
Hey team, how you doing? Rail Are You OK Day for 2021. What a privilege to be able to have a bit of a yarn with you, share a little bit of the reasons why this message, Are You OK, is such an important part of my world. As an Are You OK ambassador, I just want to share a little bit of my story on why I'm involved in this. And now, I was born at an early age, little country town called Auckland, New Zealand. So as a young fella growing up in and around Auckland and the Waikato, I was an entertainer. I loved to entertain and things like that. And I ended up getting into some really bad sort of stuff as a young fellow. I was in and out of hospital for rehab after trying to take my life many times, and for mental illness as well. And so it was a real challenge for me. And I got to 17, and I got the opportunity to come to Australia. So I ran away to Australia, so to speak, and I came here wanting to be an entertainer. Ended up I was actually crap, so I had to find a real job, and that's what I tried to do. I laboured for a lot of builders and brickies and concreters and you name it, and I ended up settling on a job as an apprentice as a plumber. I wanted to be an electrician, but my dad said, get a trade first, son. So all the electricians out there, yeah, giddy up. So I became a plumber in 1994 with the Queensland Railways, and that's when I first started my railway career. 1994 was also the year that I married my beautiful wife, Marnie. 1994 also was the first year that I started mascotting at the Brisbane Broncos. So for those who don't know, the Broncos, probably the best team in the NRL. Maybe not at the moment, but anyway. So I was Buck the Bronco for 20 years in the Broncos. But back in the 90s, my wife and I, we tried to have kids. We tried all sorts of different methods. It took us about 5 years, and we ended up having 2 beautiful girls through IVF. Which was a challenge, experiencing highs and lows around that sort of stuff as well. And now I've got 2 beautiful girls. One looks like me, and the other one looks like the gynecologist, but that's another story. So that's part of my reasons for why I'm so passionate about this conversation that we talk about here. I climbed the ladder in the railways. I tried many different roles in Queensland and Brisbane, up in Moranbah and Mackay and Rocky and all those sort of places. So I did travel a fair bit in the railways, and it was an awesome opportunity to learn different roles and different jobs and things like that. So that's part of my story. And then I got to a year in 2012. 2012 was probably my turning point. Was the year that really reinforced why I do what I do today. Now 2012, I thought I was Superman. I thought I was bulletproof, and I was doing all these different things. I was pulling in big hours at work, 12, 14 hour days. And I also thought, I live in Logan in Queensland. I don't know if anyone knows where that is, but I ran for my local seat of Woodridge, and in the state elections. I got 8% of the vote. I was pretty proud of that. And then later on that year, I went on a reality show called Australia's Got Talent. I think I made the semi-finals. So I made the semi-finals of that. So that was a good big thing. But I got to the end of that, and I was really, really cooked. I was really struggling. At that time in the organisation, there's a lot of scuttlebutt around the possibility of jobs being lost. In that sector, and so that whole anxiety over, I was in my 40s at that stage when they started touting about the job losses, and I really became anxious, and I was tired already from doing the reality show, from doing the politics and pulling big hours at work, and now that extra layer of uncertainty around my future. What am I going to do as a 40 plus year old? If I lost my job, how would I look after my family? How would I look after my kids? How would I feed them? How would I get another job? I'd only, there's that whole adage, there's a right way, a wrong way, and a railway. There's that whole perception that's a one job sort of thing. So I really was doing it tough towards the end of 2012, and this is something that really changed the trajectory of my world. Now I started doing things differently, and my boss, he started noticing. We know when people are on, we know when people are off, and he started to notice that I was struggling, that I wasn't doing okay, and so he started taking me out for coffees. He'd take me out for coffee. He goes, you're doing all right, Justin. Are you okay? And I'd be like the typical bloke. Oh, yeah, nah, the Alfie. Yeah, nah, mate, I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right, mate. I wasn't. But he kept taking me out. In fact, he kept taking me out so many times that I had to go on to skinny milk because I was starting to bloat. But finally, he got to the point where he asked me again. I said, no, mate, I'm not okay. He says, oh, far out. Well, we could tell. I'm glad you finally said something. And then I just began to explain, you know, all the things that were going on in my head. And he said, look, I don't know what to do. He says, but what I do know is, how about we make a call? And so we went back to his office, and he made a call. He called my local GP. That's all we could think of at that particular time. Now I've learnt there's so many other different resources available to us, each and every one of us in Australia. So he took me back. We made the call to the GP. The GP said, you know, you probably need to talk to a psychologist. Now, I was seeing a psychologist on the side. I just didn't tell anyone about it. So I called my psychologist up, and she said, I think you need to get to your local hospital, and I think you need to admit yourself. So my wife picked me up, and we headed to the local hospital, Logan Hospital, and it was there that I got admitted to the psych unit, where they diagnosed me with a mental illness of bipolar type 2. And that was a real big thing for me to undergo, to understand exactly what that meant for me. But that was the point that I got some help. That I actually, you know, I've attempted suicide in the past, but at that time, my boss noticed some stuff. He called me out on what we noticed, and he got me to the help that's available. And because of that, I managed to get some help and get some treatment, and actually, you know, continue to be able to do what I do today. So that is a little bit of my story, the abridged version, so to speak. But I wanted to share that to let you know that, look, you know, as a dodgy old plumber, 27 years in the game as a plumber, in the railways, in construction periods since then as well, that I've learnt some skills on how to have these conversations. Now, we've got it up there, you know, trust the signs, trust the signs. So I want to break down just how all that happened for me, and how you might be able to pick up if one of your mates, if one of your friends, if one of your family members is struggling or doing it tough, how to actually pick them up on that, how to call them out on what you notice, how to have a conversation about it, how to listen, and how to get them to the help that might be available. So I just want to break down those, we call it the 4 steps of the conversation. First, trust the signs. And when I talk about signs, you know, the things that people do. You see, we've been trained since we're knee high to a caterpillar that we don't talk about stuff when we're struggling. We don't put our hands up readily. That's what my dad taught me. That's what his dad before him taught him. And so we do things, we say things, and we do things, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, to let the people around us, the people in our world, know that, hey, we're struggling, we're doing it tough. So I liken those signs to be things like, you know, the things that we do differently. You know, my boss noticed for me that I wasn't turning up early like I usually do. And so I was making a lot of mistakes, and that wasn't like me. And I was saying stuff. Actually, I wasn't. I was the one that was singing and dancing and telling all the jokes, and then I started to become silent and withdrawn. And that was a big pickup for him. And so those are some signs, things that people do differently, things that people let us know, whether consciously or subconsciously, that they're struggling. So those are all those invitations to be able to have a conversation, to be able to ask, are you okay? And he says, Justin, you know, I'm seeing you do those sort of things. I'm hearing you say that sort of stuff. And I've got this feeling that something's not right. What's going on? Are you okay? So he picked up on those signs. And he asked me the question, are you okay? Ask the question. It's all you have to do. But we use those signs. We use all those things that we notice. So I used to be the Brisbane Broncos mascot, and I would run out onto Suncorp Stadium or Sydney Olympic Park or you know, over in New Zealand up in Townsville. I would run out onto the stadium, and people would give it to me. They would absolutely call me out on the team that I was supporting. And we do this in everyday life. So I'm not asking you to do anything different than to call your mate out, to call your friend out, to call your family member out on those changes that you notice, on those signs that they're showing us that they want a conversation about this sort of stuff. So we notice some things. We call them out and we say, hey, I'm seeing this, I'm hearing that, you know, what's going on? Are you okay? Now, don't ask that question if you're not waiting for an answer, okay? So all I'm saying is, if they're not okay, if they say, actually, no, I'm not, you know, like I did with my boss, mate, I'm not okay. And he goes, far out. Well, that's really important. Let's talk about this. I'm listening. And that's what this is about. We listen to understand, not listen to respond. You see, if you're going to ask this question, I think the biggest fear factor for a lot of people, and it was for me for a while there, was that if I ask this question, they say they're not okay, I don't know where to go to from there. So all we say is, listen to understand, not listen to respond. I'm a plumber, I fix taps. I can't fix people. And so when I was going through my stuff, I didn't actually want him to fix me. I just wanted him to hear me. I wanted him to understand all the stuff that was going on in my life that was causing my head to think, down this track and to be feeling how I was feeling. I just wanted him to understand. So we listen to understand, not listen to respond. As soon as I've gone into fix-it mode, I've actually stopped listening to me mate, to my friend, to my family member. So we listen to understand, step 2. Step 3, encourage action. Now this is it. This is where it's not so much the handball, but this is where we go, fair dinkum, you got a bit going on there, mate. I reckon we need you to get you to someone that can actually help keep you safe. Who's the best person to keep you safe? Some people, and myself included, I had a psychologist at that time. So that was probably my go-to. Nowadays, it's my wife. My wife is that person that knows all the ins and outs and knows how to get me to the safety that's out there. And so we encourage that action. Who's the best person to keep you safe right now? You got a bit going on. I reckon we need to get you to someone that actually can help keep you safe. And it could be like my boss. It could be as simple as, how about we make this call together? Let's call your GP. You see, we've had 1300 numbers and help numbers since the war. Numbers don't save people. People save people. So if you're a mate, if you're a friend, if you're a family member, make that call for that person. Keep them in the room with you. Let's call someone. Let's get you to someone that can keep you safe, that can help you right now. So use that. Encourage action. So 1, trust the signs. Ask, are you okay? 2, listen to understand, not listen to respond. Number 3, encourage action. Who's the best person to keep you safe? Who can we make a call to right now? Do we need to go to the hospital? Do we need to call an ambulance? Do we need to call your husband, your wife, your partner? Who can we call to get you to some help? And it could be the GP, it could be the hospital, it could be one of those. And then what would I want my mate to do if I was struggling and I've got some help and all that? The next one is a beautiful Kiwi word. Check in, bro. Check in. That's all you got to do. How's it going for you, mate? Because I know, look, I've been battling my stuff for probably about 34 years now. So I've been to many counsellors, many hospital stays and visits and all that sort of stuff. And I know that not every person that I've been connected with has been the right fit for me. So I always say, if I have a bad pizza, I don't stop eating pizza, I go to a different pizza shop. So this is where we check in, mate. How's that counselling going for you? Is it working? Because if it's not, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. How about we try and hook you up with somewhere else that might be a better fit for you? So that's what the check-in's about. Also lets your mate know that you care. It's not just a notch on the belt or whatever you like. This is about, hey mate, I care about you, mate. And I'm worried and I want to make sure that you're getting the right help when you need it. So that's what it's about. See the signs. Trust the signs. Call your mate out on that stuff. Hey mate, that's not like you. You're doing those things. You're saying that stuff. All of these things that I'm picking up on aren't like you. What's going on? Ask the question. Are you okay? Wait for that answer. If they are, awesome. Well, I'm still checking in on you. I'm still going to keep, like my boss said, I'm still going to take you out for coffee because I can see there's some stuff going on there. And I'm worried about you, but I'm going to keep asking and let you know. Every time my boss asked me, are you okay? It gave me a little seed of hope that someone gave a rip about me. So that's what it's all about. So ask the question, are you okay? Listen to understand, not listen to respond. Encourage action. How about we make this call together? Who's the best person to keep you safe? And then check in. That's the 4 simple steps of are you okay? Alex, ask, listen, encourage, action, check in. Check in, bro. So that's me. That's my story. Bright and shiny, and some days are diamonds and some days are stones. Some days I'm okay and some days I'm not. But it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to do nothing about it. So as a friend, as a mate, as a family member, check in on the people that have real meaning for you. Ask, are you okay, if you can see those changes, and get them to the help that's available. Thanks for that. I'm hoping each and every one of you out there is having a cracker of an Are You OK month with Rail Are You OK. Such a privilege to be able to share a little bit of my story, and hoping that you get a little bit out of that to maybe help you have those important conversations with the people in your world. So take care, look after yourself, and happy Rail Are You OK Day.
Thank you so much, Justin. Every time I hear from Justin, even though I've been doing this for so long, I get such gems, and I hope some of you, I hope many of you have taken some gems away with you there. Just the way that Justin phrases things, sometimes he's diamonds, sometimes he's stones. It's not that every day is perfect, and it's not that he's always been connected to someone that was perfect for him, but it's about prevention. And it's about looking out for your mates. And that's what Are You OK really is about. It's all about trying to get in early. It's about trying to stop small things becoming big things. Because life happens to all of us. We all go through our ups and our downs. There are many, many reasons why we may not be okay. Some of them are at the very end of the spectrum where it is crisis. And as Justin says, the most important thing we can do when someone is in crisis is to keep them safe and to get them to help, or keep someone with them to keep them safe. Now, there are also people, and I'm sure there are those on the call, who live with a mental illness. We want people with a mental illness to be thriving. And we know that sometimes this can be very complex and it can be very challenging. The best thing about you can do when you ask, are you okay, is to be non-judgmental. People very often feel stigmatized, they don't feel heard, and they feel like they are judged. So when we work alongside someone with a mental illness, or we live alongside someone with a mental illness, it's important that we keep that frame in mind, that this isn't about us and how it's impacting us, it's about them. And it's about how can we not judge them, and how can we help support them on the long journey that they're on. It's about walking side to side with them. It's not about knowing that that's what's happening in their life and leaving them to it. It's about walking alongside them so that they have a better quality of life and that they have positive, preventative support. Then, of course, we've got life's challenges, which happen to us all, as I've said. We grieve. We have relationship breakdowns. We have a tough time at work. We may be starting a new job. We may be changing jobs. We may be retiring. Perhaps we're becoming a new parent. Perhaps we are going through an illness or an injury, and that's changing our routines, that's changing our connections. As human beings, we need to connect. Our brains fire in a different way when we have that social connection. And a real preventative factor to suicide is about keeping a sense of connection, to keep a sense of that social connectedness, that someone cares about me, that I am connected to people and that I belong. If we can do that with a meaningful conversation, then that can be the one time that someone may honestly open up and answer, no, I'm not okay. And as Justin told us, his manager asked, and that took some time. That took him repeated attempts. But it's just that one moment where someone knows they do keep asking, they do care. I trust them. It's important that there is trust. And today I'm going to say, no, I'm not okay. If we could pop to the next slide. I've got here just a picture to help frame in your mind what Are You OK does and who we're talking to. We're not talking to the people who are struggling. That's not our primary goal. Our goal is to reach the people around that person who needs help. If you think of it as, we want to be that scaffolding around someone, the safety net. So we're talking to friends, to family members, to colleagues, to teachers, to managers and supervisors. If our relationships are strong with the people and with those people in our worlds, then as Justin said, we can spot the changes in people. We can spot changes in their moods, their behaviours and their appearances. And this is where Are You OK is such a great example of where it works really well in the workplace. And for the rail industry, I just want to say such a huge, heartfelt thank you for keeping this movement going. Now in 7 years, it's incredible, because what's happening is it's long term, it's repeated, it's all year round. Are You OK is all year round. And what's happening is that you're creating together more connected and safer workplaces, because it's really important that we acknowledge that someone might not be okay. They might not be okay for a long time, but it's not just about this one day tomorrow, or it's not about Are You OK Day in September. Next slide, please. We're getting, of course, I'm being asked a lot. So what have we seen during COVID? What's happening at the moment? We saw an incredible uplift in behaviours where people offered support to someone else. I'm pleased to say that face-to-face is always the most common form of connection. After that becomes listening. And then we get down to the SMSs and the emails, which are, of course, great ways to communicate. But really, that face-to-face connection is where we can really spot those changes, and perhaps may lead to a more honest answer, because we can point out what we are seeing with our own eyes. In March, when the pandemic hit, we saw all of those connection measures go up. People feeling a sense of connection, they were feeling a sense of belonging, and that someone cared about them. That started to go down in our June and around the September time, because people were frustrated. They were riding the roller coaster of COVID. People were feeling less connected. Our message was to stay connected, even though we were physically distanced. We need to keep this notion of connection up, as I've just described before. Then, pleasingly, it went up again at December. Now, I do always think of, for me personally, December is a positive time of the year for me, but Christmas and New Year can be an incredibly challenging time for people. And it's always important that we remember those people, that we don't assume that everyone has the same experiences and has the same memories and the same expectations of Christmas and New Year. So we really had that message of staying connected, and it was good to see that people were feeling that more positive sense. But what we're seeing now is that that's dipping again. And the reason why is that many psychologists are reporting that there's a lot of exhaustion happening at the moment. There's a lot of languishing, and we're hearing a lot about burnout, which is why I wanted to raise this with you as an industry and workplaces. We've been riding the roller coaster for a very long time. And whilst for some of us, it may feel like it's not really affected us, that we're doing okay, routines have changed, communication has changed, and people are definitely feeling there is so much work. There is so much to do. There is a change in how we're working together. And of course, with the return to work, I know that many of you have been in your work environments through COVID, and we're not working at home. And for those who are, there's anxieties about returning to work. And of course, people who are using the network also share those anxieties. There's a lot that's happening, and a lot that our brain is coping with at the moment. So if you're feeling that, or you're spotting that someone's if you're sensing and spotting that someone is feeling that way, it's very normal at the moment to be feeling like that. And it's important that we, again, have this conversation to say, look, I acknowledge that you're going to be feeling this way. How can I help you? What can I do? We pop to the next slide, please. So what else may be happening? Lots of parenting issues coming up with the changes in routines. Relationship issues. There's a lot that's been on people's minds as they've navigated the last year in a sense of relationships. And so quite often that can take their toll. It can be a delayed reaction. And so we're seeing that at the moment. Increased substance abuse with alcohol and other drugs. Loss of connection through the remote working and not seeing families, not seeing friends as much, the international restrictions. And the anxieties and frustration returning to work, and whether people are enjoying or not that hybrid model for those who are office-based. Pop to the next slide, please. Are You OK? We have what's called a Workplace Champions program, and this is where rail champions, I know there are many of you that are really, we'd like to describe them as the beating heart of this movement. And it's because it's people that feel really passionately about peer support. There are many different ways that organisations can provide peer support. It could be acknowledging, are you okay? But of course, it doesn't have to be the one day, it needs to be all year round. There are ways that we can visibly show and communicate to staff that there are help services available and who to go to. Sometimes we've got the EAP, sometimes we've got HR, sometimes we've got what's called peer support as the frontline people. Sometimes people maybe a bit fearful or a bit hesitant or not quite so trusting of an EAP and HR, which of course is not what we want, but sometimes people will feel more connected to someone who is a peer. And then, for example, we've got the mental health first aid training as well, which is really pleasing to see that more and more workplaces are bringing mental health to sit alongside physical health. It should be on that level playing field. Just because you can't see a mental injury doesn't mean it doesn't happen or that there are risks around. So the Workplace Champions program that we run is about finding champions within an organisation who strongly believe in the power of peer support. And we surveyed lots of organisations across the nation. And unfortunately, quite a few people don't feel that they are supported or that they are valued or that they're working in a psychologically safe workplace. Less than half strongly or moderately agree that they're confident, they know how to have a conversation. And this is where we're working really hard to change a whole societal change. It's, you know, Are You OK's mass population, it's for everyone, no matter what your job is, where your job is. It's about trying to help you feel more confident to have this conversation. And stigma towards mental health is unfortunately still prevalent, and there does need to be a lot of change here. There are a lot of organisations in this space that are working so hard to try and shift that dial, SANE Australia being one of those. We've got Origin working with youth. We've got many organisations who are running local programs, local grassroots programs to bring people together to be able to say, yes, there is this stigma, but we need to break this down. We need to show vulnerability, just as Justin did, when we feel well and able to do so, but we can share our stories because we can share ways of finding recovery or at least finding a way to thrive. Around half agree that they would be judged or penalised for a mental health issue within their workplace. There is an alliance called the Mental Health Alliance, and that's a piece of work by the Mental Health Commission, and they're working on producing guidelines and standards for organisations to really make sure that mental health is an absolute priority during workplaces. And so Are You OK really feeds into what we're trying to do with behaviour change, which does take a long time, but change is happening. There is a lot of positive things happening. I think, you know, if I look back on my career, the difference that we see, you know, that I see and hear now, not just from being in this space, but from my own friends and family, what they're telling me is becoming apparent with wellbeing, and feeling supported is really going the right way. If we could pop to the next slide. So Justin's story, I liked how he pointed out here that he went for many coffees, because I'm sure as many of you on the call would have experienced. So if we're helping someone who's in crisis, we call those people the help giver. And sometimes we just know that someone isn't okay. It's very obvious to us. But what we must do is have patience. And what we must do is keep letting them know that we care. Now, there's a way to do that respectfully. There's a way to respect their privacy, the confidentiality. There's a way that we must accept that perhaps we're not the right person. Perhaps they just don't trust us. The only way we're going to have a meaningful conversation for someone to let us know they're not okay is if they trust us. And so Justin's manager, there was obviously trust, there was a bond there, and he kept on asking him out for coffee. I loved it that he said it got quite bloated. I love Justin's sense of humour, but it is a way to show that his manager kept asking. He kept on saying, "This is what I've noticed. This is what I have seen. Can we go for coffee? Are you okay?" And it was that moment when you heard that Justin decided that it was his decision and his choice when he was going to say, "No, I'm not okay." And that is absolutely up to the individual. It can take a very long time to take a first step towards support, towards letting someone know you're not okay, because unfortunately there are bad experiences. People would have told someone that they're not okay. Perhaps those of you on the call today have felt this way, have experienced this, and you haven't felt heard. They didn't stick around for the answer, or they didn't take you seriously, or you felt judged. So what we're trying to do is, again, show that authenticity, stick around for the answer. So I've popped on the next slides. We know that Justin and his manager quite rightly said, okay, I'm not an expert here. I don't know what to do. Let's have a think about what the best thing we can do right now. And for them, they came to the conclusion that it was calling Justin's GP. What you could do is you could suggest calling the EAP, so the Employee Assistance Program. That's where organisations will fund sessions for you, and you can speak to a psychologist, and that is all confidential. Whenever your employer gets the bill through, they never see your name. They never know what it's about. It's literally just a cost. It might be, let's go and talk to HR, or have you considered talking to HR? It might be that you might, as Justin spoke about, there are helplines. I do love that he said numbers don't save people, people save people, but there are people on the end of those helplines who really do want to listen. And the way I frame it sometimes is I'd much rather put someone in touch with another person, but I will always mention that when we're in a dark space and we're struggling or we're feeling overwhelmed, things can really spiral at nighttime. We can find sleep and getting through the night difficult. We lie awake thinking. Helplines like Lifeline and Men's Line and Kids Line and Beyond Blue, they are there to listen to you in the dark of the night. So if you can say to someone, I know that you won't want to wake me up at 3 a.m., but if you really feel like you'd like to talk and you want to get something off your chest, consider calling the helpline. What I'm also quite conscious of is knowing that sometimes we can be nervous, and sometimes we can have that reaction in our gut when someone says, no, I'm not okay. We think, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do here. I'm worried. How can I help this person? I don't know what to do. You can ask somebody else for some help. For example, if this is a friend or family that you know, you could say, could we talk to so-and-so? Could we bring in so-and-so? I really feel that we can do this together. And if you're in the workplace, you can ask that person, I'd really love to sit down with so-and-so so we can work through this together and figure out a plan and a way to get you to support. Now, sometimes people won't need to be passed on to support. They will feel like they have been heard if you give them the time and the open-mindedness to speak. Of course, there is always going to be a need for professional help, but very often people just want help to unravel their thoughts. Sometimes we get everything so knotted, or there's all lots of balls juggling in the air, and we want to be able to help them to pick the one thing that's worrying them most right now, and let's tackle that together. Because, of course, as Justin said, you can then check in with them. How are you feeling now? Did you do the thing that you said you were going to do, which you thought might help? What's helped you in the past when you felt like this? There are ways that we can check in with them to say, I'd love to check in a week or so, or can we go for coffee? Or is it okay if I text you or I call you later? And I quite like to ask permission to do that, because sometimes it can be quite draining when we're having a conversation and we're sharing a lot and we've told someone what's going on. Sometimes we do need some time and space. But what's really, really important is that we let someone know that we continue to care, that we want to be there for them for however long this journey is going to be. Next slide, please. It's really common for people, and very understandable for people, to feel a bit worried about this conversation. People are worried that they won't know what to say, that if they say something, will it be appropriate? They're not sure that someone can spot the signs that someone may be troubled. And there are 3 things that you can look out for there. There is, what are they saying? What are they doing? And what's happening in their life? And this is where Justin was talking about trusting the signs. So perhaps, as Justin said, for him, he wasn't actually talking, and that was different for him. So that was a change in what he was doing. As some people may express a real sense of feeling overwhelmed. They may feel a sense of feeling alone. They feel like they're a burden to others, that there's no point to anything, that they're using tone and words they wouldn't normally use, or that is very different for them. It's becoming exaggerated. What are they doing? So perhaps they are speaking a lot, or they aren't speaking a lot. Perhaps you'll notice that their appearance is changing. Perhaps they're looking tired. Are they sleeping? Perhaps they're looking bigger or smaller. That can indicate changes to exercise or changes to diet, changes to alcohol or substance abuse. There are many things that we can look out for if we open our eyes to confidently recognize that I can see that something's changed in them. I'm going to ask. Sometimes people feel it's not their role and it's not their business, but as Justin said, people save people. And it is far, far better to ask than to not. They may not want to share their business with you, but it is better that they know that someone has noticed and that someone has taken the time to ask. When we know someone's noticed, we may not have realized what we've been doing when we've been struggling. We may not have realized what we've been saying or doing or looking. And sometimes it takes that person or that moment to think, oh, yeah, I have been feeling that way. Or, yeah, perhaps, they have clocked me. I do need to get some help. I probably should have a look into how I can help myself feel better. It's a conversation that you need to have with an expert, and like Justin said, we're not expected to be psychologists or GPs. We're expected to be someone who cares, and as in workplaces, we have a responsibility to keep our team safe, and this is a way we can help keep our team safe. And sometimes people are thinking that they don't know anyone who's at risk, or they don't have any personal connection to mental illness. Thus, an "Are you okay?" conversation isn't relevant to them and it's not needed. Well, as we spoke about when Justin finished, it's that we all go through life. So there will be someone in your world who is going through something right now, or they will in time. And so it's always important that we keep our radar up for generally what's going on through life's ups and downs. We could pop to the next slide. That's what I've just said. It's about keeping your radar up, that we still are on a roller coaster in 2021. We need to keep this conversation going, and the call to action is to follow that train of thought, keep it going. There is more to say after "Are you okay?" And that is, I'm here to listen. I'd love to know what's going on for you right now. How can I support you? How can I help? Is it okay if I check back in with you? And of course, with "Are you okay?" everything is free. So we have an enormous range of resources. For Rail Are You OK Day, we've got videos, we've got a digital toolkit for you, we've got some activities in your workplace, we've got some social media tiles. Sometimes you may not know that you've made a difference with an "Are you okay?" conversation, but I would really encourage you all that when you take on board this culture, when you take on board this notion of I am here to look after my team and my peers, that I may just sow that seed that might help someone take that first step towards support. And thank you to all the champions who help make this happen every year. And that's some tips from me, Heather. Hi, Heather. There you are.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and thanks, Justin, too. Even though he could only join us by video, I think you've both given us all some fantastic information on how to prepare for a conversation, how to have that conversation, how to listen meaningfully and support action, and of course then check in. Look, we've had a few questions come through, Catherine. If we can go through some of those.
Yeah, sure.
For the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So please, you've still got the option to send through questions. There's a pane on the right-hand side of your screen. So Catherine, you've talked a little bit just then about some of the tools that Are You OK has got available for having events like this. Have you got any particular suggestions for resources that might help with compassion fatigue and for trauma?
Yes, we do. So we have what's called a Mateship manual. And so it's a manual for those people who know that someone is experiencing a tough time. We've got one that's particular for natural disasters and emergencies, and we see the pandemic as an emergency. It's from a group from the University of South Australia, so a very trauma-informed approach. We know that sometimes an emergency, that compassion fatigue, really takes it can really manifest itself in different ways when people are experiencing trauma. Sometimes life events can help, might trigger us to go back to trauma, or we may experience it for the first time. So it's very important that when there is trauma, that there is support, that there is that referral to GP and the psychologist who really can find ways to be able to work through that trauma. And compassion fatigue is absolutely something that we know exists. And I just think for all of us last year, that was just so exhausting. We had so many people to check in on, and that really is happening. And of course, you know, our hearts and minds go out to everyone who's, you know, experienced bushfires, the recent flooding, the droughts. Again, such compounding issues. And sometimes when we've got this bucket, these compounding issues can just keep on filling this bucket up and up and up, and eventually that bucket will overflow. And so it's important that when we know someone's going through these things, you know, sometimes it'd be hard if we don't know what's actually going on in their private lives. But fortunately, you know, I think COVID has really given a bit more empathy and a little less stigma, that we are looking into people's home lives, looking into having a little window of what's going on. And so asking, are you okay, can be a way to help stop that bucket overflowing. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Catherine. I suppose on a similar theme, other questions come in about that fatigue. So as managers, managing particularly a remote workforce was in the office and now out of the office. So what suggestions do you have for someone who is worried that they're actually going to miss the signs that someone's not okay because their relationship is over the screen rather than in person, and you're not seeing those more subtle changes of someone?
I really get this. I think it's been such a big concern for all of us, myself included. We're a really small team at Are You OK? But there's four individuals who are interstate. And I think that for many managers, there is a natural ability to have those soft skills to spot those signs. But sometimes there is a need for greater education. There is a need for greater training. So I think absolutely it can be finding some training for yourself and other fellow managers so that you can learn a bit more around spotting the signs. That's a good mental health first aid training, or Living Works, or Black Dog Institute. I think also it's helpful that if we've got remote working, who are they connecting with? Because obviously they've got colleagues. And if they're all connecting remotely, it might be helpful if you check in with someone that you know does connect with them. This is what I think I've spotted. I'm not sure, or they seem to be tracking okay. Are you getting that same sense? I don't think there's anything wrong with checking in with your colleagues or checking in with the teams that work with someone to say, is there anything you think I should know? Is there anything that you know that's going on? And that isn't about breaching confidentiality. That's not about prying. That's about us as managers taking on that responsibility that we want to know how our teams are doing. Sometimes they don't always feel comfortable telling us. So who can we go to? Who can we look to that may be another source of information?
So thanks, Catherine. So if you do reach out for to somebody and you ask them, are they okay? But they get really offended that you've asked them that, and they believe that you're mistaking the signs. How do you deal with that? It does make you a bit anxious about asking the question in case you're getting it wrong.
It does, and it can then it can make us feel anxious when we need to ask it again, perhaps with someone else or in a different scenario. I think that everyone, we all can get it wrong. I've got it wrong. Absolutely. I've got it wrong. In my instance, I've got a couple of instances where, someone did feel that, that I was seeing things that weren't there. And I said, look, I'm sorry if this has angered you or frustrated you. It's just that this is what I thought I was seeing and hearing because X, Y, Z. And I think it may be that they're just not ready to hear it yet. They're not ready for that mirror to be put up to them. If you have got it wrong, then absolutely accept that you've got it wrong. If they tell you they've got it wrong, then fair enough. Try not to feel anxious about the next time, because it is far, far better to ask someone than to not, and we have a tragedy. So sometimes it can be a case of knowing that we might have it wrong. But if we can give them evidence or just an example of what you thought you'd seen, and perhaps that could be a way to encourage a bit more of a lengthier conversation, which I would suggest would probably be better at another time. So if they are feeling angry or they are feeling frustrated, then close that moment and maybe find an opportunity to perhaps raise it again if they wish to do so.
Another question's come in about the stigma of talking about mental health. Whilst there is a lot of conversation happening, we've got parliamentary inquiries, there was the Victorian Royal Commission, so there's talk about mental health, but are we really, really ready to talk amongst ourselves about mental health? How do we reduce this? How do we improve our comfort level with having this conversation?
I think it is about normalising it, and I think it's about being regular. So I think it's not around seeing someone who you think is in crisis, or they're having a big life event, and only talking about mental health then. This is, we all want to thrive. We all want to live well. We all want to have a good quality of life. And the way to do that is to hopefully have early intervention and prevention. So, for example, teaching children at a very young age, we have our primary school resources that you're never too young to look out for a buddy. It's a life foundation skill that we should all be taught, that we're never too young to look after our minds, that we're never too young to explore what is well-being for us. How are we at our personal best? What do we need? And who is our safety net? Who is our circle? Who can we trust? And I think that, if we can start to have conversations within our circles to say, you're my go-to person. Justin says that his go-to person is now his wife. They've obviously had conversations about that. They've gone through experiences together. Sometimes when we struggle, we forget those people closest to us. We forget those people who have helped us before or have said they want to be with us. So in answer to the stigma question, I think it's about normalising it, but I think it needs to be normalising it is where we have people coming forward, like Justin, and those who always bravely share their stories on Rail Are You OK Day, around what their experience was, what it felt like for them, how helpful it was that someone listened and didn't judge them, and how they found a pathway to recovery, how they found a pathway to support. If we can normalise it, it doesn't just happen to a few people over here, that we all go through something. I think that will help. And then that regularity, that we're having these conversations from a really young age, regularly.
Catherine, our time is coming to an end. So thank you very much for answering all of those questions and talking us through all of these tools and ideas for us to take forward and put into practice each and every day. And of course, having our conversations in our workplaces is really facilitated in the rail industry by our amazing company champions. And I would like to thank each and every one of them for really facilitating the conversation, having that culture change pushed along in their own organisation. So thank you individually to each one of you. So after the webinar today, you will each receive a short survey, and we really do hope that you will fill that in and give us feedback on what's gone well for you, what you'd like us to do in the future. And coming up tomorrow and continuing the Rail Are You OK Day theme, Are You OK is actually hosting a live Q&A and a webinar about when and how to ask a workmate, are they okay? So it's at midday Australian Eastern Standard Time, and you can register for that webinar on the TrackSAFE website. And of course, ARA has got many more webinars scheduled over the coming weeks on a whole range of topics, and you can see that program on the ARA website. So thank you all again for participating today and being involved in Are You OK Day. Each and every day is, of course, Are You OK Day, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with the organisation and with each of you as we move forward through the year. Thank you all, and good afternoon.